Hey guys, just wanted to jump on here really quick. I've had a lot of people reach out to me in terms of how they can support what I'm doing. I am doing this full time now, and if you'd like to contribute, if you like and value the work that I'm doing and like to contribute, on every single episode, I have a title "Support My Work." Underneath it, there's a Venmo, Locals, Cash App, or if you prefer not to use one of those methods, you can mail a check or money order to PO Box 25383, Scottsdale, Arizona 85255 9998. So, again, thank you for all the support. Appreciate it and look forward to more conversations ahead. All right, Tom, thanks for coming back on here. And first of all, let me start off by saying, all the times that you do appear and you're always willing to come speak with me. And as we wrap up 2024 into 2025, thank you so much for, making time to do this. I appreciate that.
Sure. No, I appreciate it. I appreciate the invite, Mike. It's fun. I don't have a I say this to people all the time. I don't mind, I don't care to talk about it. If I have time and I can do it, and it's like I got all my work done today, and it's we're doing this late at night as opposed to this one is it's not a problem. I have fun doing this stuff. Are you kidding me? So.
Well, and I thought for this conversation, look, we can talk about the end of the world anytime, and that carousel is not going to stop. Nuclear war,
Nope.
Russia, whatever, right? And in our previous conversations, we get into these movie topics, and I'm like, you know what? I want to lighten things up. I'm gonna hopefully have
Sure.
Jim also next week to talk about movies and just
hmm
entertainment and just to shake it up a little bit. like,
Sure. It's kind of important, right? It's one of those things where, it's funny. Like I like talking. I can talk about just about anything. You can look behind me. I could do I'm as comfortable sitting in on a board game podcast or talking about comic books or music or whatever. But, for my podcast, right, we have to kind of stay on brand geopolitics, and I have to actually do all the serious stuff and a little bit of culture war stuff, but not a lot. So I look forward to being able to have a conversation about this stuff because I actually really like talking about this stuff. I also just think it's really important because I think we live in a time where everybody's so dispirited and they're so distrustful and everything else that and clearly Hollywood's been a part of the culture war, and they've made some very very bad decisions, and they've probably possibly even terminal decisions in terms of their business model and everything else has been going on for a long time that you know you just when you start talking about these things, I get a lot of pushback from my people saying, dude, I don't want to fucking hear you talking about movies or music or this or anything. We don't pay you for that. I'm like, well, that's nice. You actually pay me for whatever the hell it is that I decide that I want to talk about. But that's because if I think it's important and germane to Gold Goats and Guns in some lesson form, then I think it's worth talking about. And I also think you're right in that we should just kind of sit back and, as opposed to leaning forward and do this thing and like, okay, let's talk about movies. Where's my cigar? You know what I mean? Like, let's just have some fun with this because it's there's a lot to learn about these things, and you never. Stories are important. I firmly believe this. I firmly believe this. The stories are the most important, if not stories are civilization. I just part of the one of the things that didn't get this, nobody got to see in my talk that I gave at the Mises Institute. I led off the whole thing with that the stories are really important, and the mechanics of storytelling are important, and how we structure our stories and it are very important because that's how we teach generations lessons from we pass generational knowledge down. Without stories, there is no civilization. Without stories, there is no way to build on a greater division of labor, which doesn't. So then we can get all into the shit I talk about all the time. So what's on your mind about movies? What were you thinking?
So my thought was like I'll bring up a movie and then my goal through this conversation, you give me some homework of because there's a lot of movies that I haven't seen and I'm not going to pretend like
Mm-hmm.
I can go toe to toe with you. I mean I've touched on a little bit and I'm an amateur in the ring with a pro fighter in terms of your hand speed is too much for me. So all I can do is grab and try to survive the round. So I mean we went through this with the John Carpenter stuff. But so my
Mm-hmm.
thought, like the first movie I watched recently, and I don't know, I just love watching it in December. Was
Sure.
Goodfellas.
Wow. Okay. So, this is one of those things that I'm going to say you've got me on the ropes because I've seen Goodfellas once. I
Oh,
saw it once back in college. I don't tend to rewatch Scorsese. I don't know why. I love his movies. Whenever I sit down and watch a Scorsese movie, I'm like, this fucking thing is great. And then I never want to watch it again. Like I've seen The Departed once, great freaking movie. I've seen Goodfellas once, thought it was fantastic. I've seen Taxi Driver once. I've seen Raging Bull once. I've seen Age of Innocence once. I have not seen Gangs of New York. I've seen Shutter Island once. Like with Scorsese, I get The Aviator. I've seen so many of his movies, but I've never ever. Whenever I get like, what do you want to watch? I'm like, yeah, I don't want to watch that again. And it's not and that says something for me because I love watching movies 10, 20, 30 times, movies that I love. But they tend to be genre flicks. And I don't know. I mean, and it's even funny when it comes to gangster films because I'll throw one back at you on the other side. If I've watched Miller's Crossing, which is the Coen brothers, great movie about the Irish and Italian mobs in Boston. Um, if I've watched it once, I've watched it 20 times. I mean, I can recite whole you know segments of that movie. I quote it all the time, right? And it's a brilliant movie. But Goodfellas, I've only seen once,
what about
and I know
Godfather?
it's great. Godfather. I've seen once. I haven't watched it since I was in my 20s. Same thing with Goodfellas. I haven't seen any of those. I need to watch The Godfather again. That may be actually something I need to like. All of these are movies that keep getting thrown back in my face. Very recently, like Dexter White's talked to me about this. He's like, I think it's time for me to watch Goodfellas again. I'm like, God, I haven't watched Goodfellas in 30 years. And he literally like dropped the phone and then started yelling at me. Like, dude, seriously. Like, same thing with The Godfather. I can't quote The Godfather. I think I've seen The Godfather 1 and 2. I think I've seen them twice. I think I watched them once with my dad as a teenager, and I think I watched them either once or twice while we were in college, but I haven't seen them since.
Did you even bother with the third one?
No, I've never seen Godfather 3.
Yeah, terrible. You know, it's fun. It's funny you say that. That's how I feel about most of the Nolan movies.
That's
Interstellar, I
a
watched it
very
once, and I have no desire to watch that again.
well, okay. It depends on the movie with Christopher Nolan. Like I've watched all the Batman films. If I watched Batman Begins once, I've watched it 10 times. The Dark Knight, I think I saw it 3 times in the theater, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, me too. The
Um,
Batman's, excluding the Batman's, I've seen those multiple
yeah, the
times.
Batman films I've all watched a lot of times. I've wanted to watch The Prestige more than once, and every time I go to sit down and say, "Yeah, I should watch," because I love The Prestige. I thought it was so one of my. I mean, when I watched The Prestige the first time, I was like, because I watched it as research for what was going to come when he did The Dark Knight. Because I watched Batman Begins, and I was like, okay, this was good, and I didn't like Memento. I
I never
hated
saw that.
Memento, and I still
I
did.
never saw Memento.
Well, I'll save my Memento rant for a little bit. But I heard that I said, okay, he's writing The Dark Knight with his brother Jonathan. So I said, and they wrote The Prestige together, and then Chris Nolan directed it, and I said I want to watch The Prestige, so I did, and I was like, whoa, if The Dark Knight is half the movie that this one is, The Dark Knight's going to be a great movie. Um,
Was the Prestige after Batman Begins then?
no, it was his. It, I don't think so. No, I think it was. I know he made Insomnia or is the second movie, or is Prestige the second movie?
Dark
No,
Knight
but
was in '08. I remember.
yeah,
And
Dark
Batman
Knight's
Begins was
08,
'05.
Batman Begins is 05. I think he might have been. I think the Prestige is 06.
So it was in between.
Um, yeah, and and I watched it. I thought it was great, and I haven't watched it again. But it's a great movie. I mean, it's Nolan absolutely at his best in terms of Chris Nolan talks about his screenplays is that he likes to unfold them. They're puzzles, and I think The Prestige is a really one of his best puzzles. I've watched Tenet at least 4 times now,
See, I haven't seen
and I
that.
don't. And I'll tell you this: the reason I keep watching Tenet over and over again is I keep trying to figure out how Tenet works. And I finally bought it on 4K, to own it because I cut off my Max subscription a few months ago, and I tend to movies I know I'm going to watch a few times. I tend to buy them and then own them so that nobody can fuck with them. They can't edit them later on or you know take out the naughty language they don't like or whatever. And so I tend to do this with both books and movies that I build and curate my board game collection. Half of my board game collection are games that I may never play again, but I hold on to them because I don't want them to get lost to time because I'm kind of curating like the interesting mechanisms that were in the game, or they were just an interesting part of the history of board games, right? So I care about them from that perspective. And same thing with books. If there's a book that I buy for an author, even if I only read it on my Kindle or I get a digital copy of it, I always buy a hardcover. I always buy the physical copy of it, and then I go and try and find a PDF or an EPUB, for free somewhere else to read it. But I've given the writer their due. I bought the physical material. Well, the same thing with movies. If I see a movie and I like it and I want to hold on to it and I want to get it, I wait until I'll just troll Amazon every once in a while and I'll go, ooh, that's $6. Buy that. And it's usually worth it just for the extra material or the commentary or something like that, because there's going to be something worth curating and holding on to permanently. Even if I only watch the movie one or two other times in the rest of my life, but I'll hold on to them because it's worth owning. Um, so yeah, like Interstellar, I watched once. I had no desire to watch it again. Dunkirk was really good.
I
But
like that.
Tenet,
I've only seen Dunkirk once.
yeah, I watched it once and I really liked it. I probably will watch it again at some point. It's starting to get under my skin that I need to watch it again. But I'll rewatch Nolan's films, but I'll be watching them as a screenwriter or as a director or as an editor. I won't be watching them to enjoy them. I'll be watching them for how they were constructed because I find his process interesting. I didn't like Inception the first time I watched it because I really felt that the screenplay was underbaked. It's also a it's also a crib of my favorite book of all time, Philip K. Dick's Ubik. And it's kind of his homage to Ubik. And I felt like, okay, that's your homage to Philip K. Dick, and you fucked that up that badly, then I don't want to watch Interstellar because that's your homage to Stanley Kubrick. And like after Dark Knight Rises, I got really tired of Christopher Nolan's like ambition exceeding what I thought at the time was his talent. And so Inception, I thought, was way up over his talent level. I think he reached for the stars and he failed.
What'd you think
And
of
so
Insomnia, Tom? Not to cut you off, but
didn't see Insomnia. I think
oh,
that's the only one of his movie of his I haven't seen. Um, so um, so to finish the story about Inception, because he was treading in territories very precious to me, and I don't think he did a particularly good job with it. I was really, and then Kubrick is even more precious. Almost in film terms, Kubrick is as precious to me as Philip K. Dick is to the written word. That oh my god, I remember downloading off of the Pirate Bay Interstellar. I'm like I don't know, like right after it first came out, and then sat on my hard drive. That I download a bunch of stuff and put it on the hard drive and then stick it and then watch it and then stick the hard drive into the Amazon Cube or my Blu-ray player and then watch it on the big television. And it sat there for 5 years. I'm like, yeah, I don't want to watch. I was like, no one, and then I finally sat down one night and my wife and I went on a whole Nolan kick and we watched Tenet, that Dunkirk, rewatched Inception. And I liked Inception slightly better the second time, but I still don't think it's very good. Um, and 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 I really liked Interstellar, but again, no desire to watch it a second time. But I really liked it. So
what about Oppenheimer? I haven't seen that.
I'm seeing it. I'm seeing
Yeah,
it.
me neither. Do you have any desire to watch it?
I'll be honest with you. I'm not a really big fan of Cillian Murphy. He kind of annoys me. Like as an actor, he was so good as the Scarecrow that he just creeps me out. I can't, what I mean? He's a very good actor, but I just can't. Like there's nothing. He is not a draw for me to watch a film, and I really do think it's because he was just so unbelievably creepy as the Scarecrow, which was the first time I saw him. So my imprint of him is that he's the Scarecrow and that guy's an asshole. And I don't want, Javier Bardem is another one that like the first time we saw him was in No Country for Old Men. And he was so creepy that, my wife and I talk about this all the time. She's like, yeah, no matter what, every time I see him, he just creeps me out. But he was great as Stilgar in the Dune movies. I mean, he was brilliant. He was, lovely as the, kind of comic relief and and but still like the emotional center, the spiritual centers of the film. I think he was still excellent.
I liked him as the villain in Skyfall too. That's probably
Yeah, no, he was very good in Skyfall. Yeah, that's a
well,
great movie.
yeah. That was one of my favorite. And here's another guilty admission. The only Sean Connery Bond movie I ever saw was Never Say Never Again.
That's interesting. I really liked that movie when I was a teenager when it first came out. I think I saw it. If I think I saw it in the theaters twice because I think it was the first Bond film I'd ever watched. Right, and
Came out the same year as Octopussy. Did you know that?
yeah. I didn't see Octopussy, but then I went on a bit of a James Bond kick for a little while, um, and uh, and not just because of the chicks, but that's never a bad draw. And I have seen most of the Sean Connery. I've seen Doctor No. I've seen From Russia with Love, and they haven't aged very well. And you have to get back into the '60s, and I'm not a huge fan of that era of filmmaking. To be honest with you, like late '50s, mid '60s, this doesn't really do much for me. I mean, I like Hitchcock's films from that time. I love North by Northwest, which was really Hitchcock's, you know, Bond film. To be honest with you, it was great. Um,
What about the Roger
but
Moore stuff? Did you like the Bond, Roger Moore?
I like Roger Moore as Bond, but I thought the movies were just really silly. I liked them when I was a kid. I thought they were good kids films, but they haven't. I just don't think they've aged very well.
The last one wasn't very
I,
believable.
I,
View to a
but to
Kill.
me,
View to a Kill was really it was a real stretch.
oh, it's a terrible movie. Though, Tanya Roberts was like it's really hard for me to like.
It's like making out with his
But
granddaughter. Like, it was
God,
just-
it's terrible. So, uh, but I really like the Daniel Craig series. Even the I mean, so it's generally considered like 1, 3, and 5 are good. So, Casino Royale is a brilliant movie, and then Skyfall is great, and then the fifth one is solid. I actually like all 5 of them, and I like the arc of all of them. I even like Quantum of Solace. I actually think Quantum of Solace. The more I've watched it like 4 or 5 times. Once you like get the idea of what's going on, the form and function of Quantum of Solace, and yes, it was made under very difficult circumstances, and yes, the script wasn't really quite finished, and it never really paid off, and they did some weird stuff with it. I thought the whole arc of that, like of that as a career for James Bond, I thought was really really well done, and I kind of like Quantum of Solace actually. I think the weakest film of the 5 is Spectre, without
yeah,
a doubt.
I remember I saw Spectre once, and I remember not walking away from it. Not didn't really care for it. I didn't see the last one.
No Time to Die is a good movie. It's, but you're paying off plot threads from the worst of the movie. Like, so you're paying off, the love interest with Madeline and, Leah Sado so it's hard from that perspective because I just don't think that that's a particularly, the problem is that Spectre was so kind of badly written that they didn't really have um, it's like I think that their relationship is much better handled in No Time to Die than it was in Spectre. Like, and so, but it had the same kind of starting point that Anakin and Padme had in Attack of the Clones, which was that it wasn't really believable. No matter how hard they tried to sell it, it just wasn't well written enough to really be compelling.
And they
So
shuffled the deck too with Skyfall by bringing Sam Mendes in and Thomas Newman to do the musical score, and then they also made it not it wasn't the center point wasn't Bond versus the villain like it always was, where M was the center
right,
of
right.
with Javier Bardem, which was just different.
Yeah, no, really broke the model really, really well. And it's kind of I'm sure that if you went back and did a structural analysis of it as like a 5-act play, it's a very interesting, that being the midpoint. And then, Act 4 is not particularly, Act 4 starts to move into a different area, but it's picking up plot threads that, that they really did. Like, Quantum of Solace is very interesting because Quantum as an organization and that movie is really, oh, by the way, that's Davos. Right? You watch Quantum of Solace and you realize that James Bond is fighting Davos and uncovering Davos. And then they shy away from it and morph it into Spectre. And it's almost like they got the tap on the shoulder and said, you can't do that. You know what I mean? And so the rest of so while I love Daniel Craig as James Bond, he's by far my favorite James Bond. You're having to deal with that, those issues. It's almost like, well, they started down a path that they weren't allowed to go. Um, but but I mean, as a story, it's got a lot of really cool ideas in it about institutional collapse, and as MI6 collapses, and all of the so it really is in many ways a swan, not a swan song, but a kind of an elegy for a time when British intelligence was powerful. And maybe that's like predictive programming to say that it's not powerful anymore, and that we're not supposed to believe that it's very powerful anymore, and even though it still has its place. I don't know. It's a very interesting. I'm not sure if it's a little bit of misdirection, or if it's actually capturing the zeitgeist, that the reality that MI6 is on the downside of its potency. I was talking with Dexter White about this, and he brought it up the other day, talking about Syria. We did the podcast about it the other day, and he's like, I know you don't probably agree with me about this, but I just don't see this being an MI6 operation, the whole, taking over Syria. I just don't see it that way. I don't see that as being. This is his argument. He's like, I don't see that as part of MI6's areas of expertise anymore. They're much better at helping the Ukrainians blow up bridges and stage massacres at opera houses, but they're not particularly good at regime change. That's what we're good at the CIA, right? The CIA is good at that. That's our core competency. Their core competency is staging false flag events, right? So,
what about? Wouldn't it be awesome if Nolan took over the Bond franchise?
Do you think so?
Well, that's his baby. Like
Maybe.
that's his. He's referenced the
like
fact.
that. Yeah.
Well, you know what? Just because at this point, I'm just having a hard time buying the whole pop gun, and
right.
So why not go back to the basis of what the novel was post World War II?
Right.
I mean, because we did,
actually go back and do Bond as a Cold Warrior.
Right, or even have him in World War II and then leading into the agency.
Sure.
And Nolan doing that,
that would be cool. I mean, James Bond as real, honest to God, historical drama, right? During the golden age, really, of British intelligence and the emergence of the CIA and everything else would be very interesting.
And Nolan would, especially with Dunkirk,
Chris Nolan would write puzzles Chris Nolan would write puzzles that are inscrutable and cool, and he would get off on it, right? And that would be interesting, but it would also, knowing Nolan's politics, which are quite based. I don't think MI6 and the British government and everything else are ready or willing to have Chris Nolan deconstruct MI6 just yet. I think something else I think we're gonna have to go through another layer of them hitting rock bottom before they're willing to actually do that level of self-examination. Let's just put it that way.
Interesting. Do you think Denis Villeneuve is Nolan?
Denis
I would say
Villeneuve?
Nolan. Do you think but Villeneuve is the top director right now, or the most sought after?
Probably, and I've really liked everything that I've seen of his. Okay, so I love Sicario.
I love Sicario. I love Sicario.
The Arrival was beautiful.
I didn't see The Arrival. I didn't cut you off. I didn't see all of The Arrival. I didn't finish it. It was boring, Tom.
Really? Yeah, but it's Denis Villeneuve. So is Blade Runner 2049.
I love that. I love Blade Runner 2049.
I really like The Arrival, but I have a real soft spot for Amy Adams. I just think not only is she gorgeous, which she is, but she's also just I can't take my eyes off her. She's so good in everything I've ever seen her in, and I've seen her in a whole bunch of really marginal little movies that she's done, and she's just always been at times better than The Material. There's a little movie that she did with Emily Blunt of all. So Amy Adams and Emily Blunt. This is the only thing that could be complete the Tom Luongo trifecta of great babes. Is Sandy Bullock was in the movie as well. There's a little movie called Sunshine Cleaning.
Never saw it.
Great little movie about these two sisters it's a great movie. Little movie. Oh, well, sorry. They're great in it. It's not a great movie. They're great in it. And the two of them together are just I adore Emily Blunt, by the way. She's just phenomenal. But yeah, so the two of them together, just get me, I'm there. Found that one night. It's a great little movie.
I feel like
But
Sicario.
The Arrival was really good. Blade Runner 2049 is phenomenal.
I think that's phenomenal. Blade Runner 2049. I've rewatched that recently. It's fucking awesome.
Mm-hmm. No, I walked out of the theaters, and I walked out of the theater of Blade Runner 2049. Saw it, big RPX theater, like, the RPX is kind of like IMAX, like was it Regal Cinemas has something called RPX, which is not quite IMAX, but it's really cool. The seats shake and rumble, and it's a really nice. It's a really good. If you can't go to an IMAX, then it's the next best thing, right? And we got done watching it, and I walked out, and we were driving home. For me, that's a half an hour trip from the movie theater back home because I live about half an hour north of Gainesville, and normally Camille and I are just deconstructing the movie and we're doing our thing because we're both, frustrated screenwriters and, we usually have something to say. And we walked out of Blade Runner 2049 and we just drove home. Very little got said other than, wow, that was good. And I'm like, I think Camille had the quote of the day. I know that there was something incredibly important that I just watched, but I can't put my finger on what it was. Now, we've since watched it multiple times, and now I have a pretty good handle on it. But the only other filmmaker that has made me consistently feel that way after watching a movie is Stanley Kubrick. And that's high praise. Like, the last time I walked out of a movie where I was completely and utterly, I have nothing to fucking say, was Full Metal Jacket. I saw it in the theaters with a friend of mine. When I was summer I was home from college. It came out in summer of '87, so I was home for my freshman year of college. My one of my good friends from high school. We went to see it. We got done, and this is two guys that our entire life was together. Is we sit around coffee and sit and chat about everything, right? Music, movies, everything. We were completely silent for the 45 minutes it took us to drive from where we saw the movie to our regular haunt at the diner in my hometown. And we just kind of looked at each other and went, wow. And Blade Runner 2049 had a similar effect on Camille and I. And then we, proceeded to go and watch it again, then get it on Blu-ray. And if I've watched it once, I've watched it like 5 times. Now I've seen Blade Runner 40 times. And I had a very similar experience when I walked out of Blade Runner for the first time. I was 13. I saw it in theaters. Summer 1982. Yes, I'd have been 13. And I walked out of that movie completely overwhelmed.
Yeah, the second Blade Runner, I've watched it. I've watched it multiple times, but I'll tell you, Dune 1 and 2, especially Dune 2, and I loved it. I don't have a desire to watch it again.
I have no desire to watch Dune 2 again because they ruined Chani. I adore Dune 2 other than what they did to Chani. And because the ending landed so badly.
Why would they do? I didn't read the book.
I'm not really like, the rest of it is phenomenal. I've watched the first part of it. I think I've watched this about 5 or 6 times. Easily 5 or 6 times. Because we watched it on HBO Max, and then we went to see it in the theaters. And then I watched it a couple more times on HBO Max. But then Dune 2, I saw it once, and I wanted to go see it again, but we deconstructed how they destroyed Chani's character.
How they destroy it?
They turned her into a fucking feminist, and she's supposed to be the trad wife that pushes Paul to do what he needs to do, even though he doesn't do it. They turned her into the antagonist, Paul as the antagonist. They gave her the wrong role. It's not Chani's job in that story to tell Paul that he's going down a bad path. We as the audience don't need that character. They, in whatever reason, and Denis Villeneuve cops to the idea that he chose this path willingly, and that it wasn't studio interference because they cast Zendaya as fucking Chani and they couldn't have her be a trad wife. I'm not convinced of this, by the way, but hey, that's just me. But Chani's role is she is really the essence of what the Fremen are. If anybody should have been the character that doubted Paul as the Messiah, it should have been Stilgar. If you were going to rebuild, if you're going to recast one of the characters in Dune to fulfill that role, to be the audience's in for the skepticism of where Paul's going to go, because you generally tend to do that in films. You need to have a character the audiences can relate to that doesn't buy things. So that's the way that it's like Han Solo is a proxy for the audience in Star Wars. This thing's really fucking silly. And that's that guy. And he's that guy. But even he buys into it. And because he buys into it, then you can buy into it. By putting that in Chani's mouth, like putting it out on Chani's, he destroys the character because Chani is incredibly important because she's the one that says to Paul, no. She's in effect, okay, so women have only a couple of archetypes, right? They've got Beauty and the Beast, Belle, who's going to redeem the bad man, right? Going to redeem the Beast. Or Sleeping Beauty is another version of that same thing. And then you have Mary, the mother who sacrifices her son for the betterment of humanity, right? Well, that's what Jessica does to Paul, and doesn't let Paul have any agency in that because she's a Bene Gesserit. So that makes Jessica so the role of Mary in Dune is really split equally between Jessica and Chani, in a sense. Jessica forces Paul onto this path that he doesn't want to go there. And then Chani's job is, and in the story, is to say, oh, no. As much as your mom shouldn't have done this to you, this is still the right thing for you to do. And we're going to have, and then that sets up the essential conflict that ends Paul's story, which is how he tries to protect Chani as the emperor, now having replaced the emperor, because none of the great houses want him to breed so that he doesn't have a legacy. They want him, like Trump, to be a one and done. Right? And then they'll swoop back in, they'll restore the old order. That's the whole plot of Dune Messiah. Leaving the Chani Paul relationship where they did, and leaving the fucking story, the movie ending with Chani getting on her sandworm and riding off at Paul's moment of triumph, makes her the main fucking character, not Paul Atreides. And that's horse shit. And they turned it into, what? They turned it into Twilight in the desert? Like, fuck you. Like, I'm serious. I was deeply, I don't believe in the concept of offense because I think that's just passive aggressive hurt. I think they just destroyed the story. And it's like, wow, you really, what, you say Dune's your favorite fucking book of all time, and you missed this kind of important point on how the book ends. Have you read the book?
No.
Okay, so the book ends. The book ends with almost the exact same way. Paul fights Fade, beats him in the duel, and forces the Emperor into submission. Takes Irulan as his wife in order to unite the houses. The Harkonnens are destroyed. The Bene Gesserit are pushed back into the shadows. He tames the guild. He controls the spice, and he marries Irulan in order to make everybody happy. But she's never going to have his heart. And Jessica, at the end of the story, stands there next to a bereft Chani because Paul is marrying someone else. And she says, the last line of the book is Jessica's, where she says, don't worry about this. I don't remember the original, the first part of the direct quote, but I remember the last part of it. Like, but trying to console her, saying, don't worry about this. She may be his wife, but on name only. She will never have his heart, and she will never bear him children. We, who history calls concubines, who they call concubines, history will call us wives. Paying off the whole story, which is that Jessica betrays the Bene Gesserit because she loves her Duke and gives him a son, even though they told her to never give Duke Atreides a son because they wanted to destroy the Atreides. It was part of their breeding program. They didn't want her to do this because they figured they decided that the Kwisatz Haderach wasn't ready yet, wasn't going to happen yet, and they wanted to control the Kwisatz Haderach, and they couldn't control the Kwisatz Haderach if it was going to be Leto's and Jessica's son. So they wanted her to give him nothing but daughters so that his line would die out. They would control the breeding program to get the Kwisatz Haderach that they wanted, which is the male Bene Gesserit. And Jessica, out of an act of love, defies them, has a son. His name is Paul, and then the whole story starts. So really, Dune's inciting incident happens 18 years before the book even opens, because Paul was born. Jessica makes the decision to have a son, and because Bene Gesserit can control their, they can control everything about their body chemistry. They can choose to have sons versus daughters, and it's all that. That's the magic part of Dune, or whatever you want to call it. So it's all a big payoff in that respect. So what she's saying is, don't you worry, he's going to give you children. You're really his wife, in the same way that I was the Duke's wife, even though he could never marry me. And so Jessica was then fulfilling her promise as Paul, not only Paul's mom, but as now the old crone, helping in that role as well, because that's another female archetype, is the old crone, is now, saying, no, we have a family now that we would have never had before. And yes, it's going to unleash chaos on the world. And yes, you're going to have to be there to shepherd Paul through all of these things, but that's your job. And Chani would be willing to take that on. Yeah, was more than willing to take that on. And to turn Chani into his antagonist is a complete fucking betrayal of the entire goddamn story.
So do you think they'll course correct it in the new one? Or you'll see the new one though, regardless, right?
I'm going to put it to you this way: if Villeneuve pulls off a course correction that redeems all of that horseshit, I'll clap to the high heavens. Hell, I'll even buy them on Blu-ray and stick them or in 4K and stick them on my shelf. But I'm not convinced he can, because I don't think anybody can come back from that. But he's hinted that he can. I'm like, okay, let's see what you do. However you pull that off, where Paul is not simping for Chani, because at this point, as far as I'm concerned, Chani really is mediocre pussy, right? Which is what simp stands for, right? Well, the second half of simp, like. I just don't understand. But it is certainly not the version of Dune. Like that to me betrays a kind of either fundamental misunderstanding of what the story actually is, or a willful desire to subvert what the story is actually about to fit to today's political agenda. I'm going with the former, because I want to be generous to Denis Villeneuve, because he did such a wonderful job with Blade Runner 2049, where he got everything right. And of course, he had a great screenplay to work from. Of course, Hampton Fancher, the screenwriter of both the original Blade Runner and 2049, he only spent 20 years working on the sequel. Just like he only worked on Blade Runner's friggin' screenplay for 10 years before finally handing it off to David Peoples to finish the final draft of it. But Hampton Fancher has been working on the sequel to Blade Runner forever.
Is he still alive?
So he's had all the time.
Is he still alive?
What's that? I don't know. I think so. Probably. I mean, if he is, he's in his 70s.
Yeah. I'd love to see him. 80s. I'd love to see, not that this would happen, but Villeneuve would come back and do Sicario 3. Even though he didn't do Sicario 2, it wasn't bad for a sequel.
I didn't see it.
Oh, you should watch it. It's not bad.
Okay. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was so from that perspective, like Dune was very, very deeply disappointing from that perspective, but everything else about the movie was brilliant.
Yeah.
Like the the understanding of the architecture of the different houses, and I mean, all of it. I mean, it showed so much. The whole world that was created showed so much attention and understanding of Dune from a visual perspective, and the visual storytelling, and how the art, and how the architecture and the costumes and
And the
everything.
music, Hans Zimmer's musical
And the
score,
music is
was it?
unbelievable. And oh God, it's all so good. And then to betray literally one of the three most important characters in the entire fucking story.
See, I would not
I
read the
mean,
book. I would have never
I
known
will say
that.
this. Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I've been getting into it on Twitter with a bunch of people who've only watched The Last Jedi one time, and they've like called it like the worst movie ever fucking made. I will be honest. I will make this pledge. I will watch Dune 2 a second time, if not a third time, to see if my criticism of it still holds true after a second or third viewing. I will do that. I almost always do that with films that I have a fundamental problem with, like even Inception. I went back and finally watched it a second time to see if my initial triggered reaction of him like fucking up Philip K. Dick. I mean, look, he's not the first guy to fuck up Philip K. Dick. Like more movies have been, more of his books have been adapted into film by Hollywood than any other writer in history, and 75% of them suck, like flat out suck, right? So I don't, I'm not. That's not what I'm. But it's Ubik, which is a really important book, and it's the best direct translation of Ubik, as opposed to a lot of the other. Ubik's been done like 4 or 5 times. It will never be made into a film directly because it's already been cribbed so many times. Like Jacob's Ladder cribs it. The movie with Tim
Robbins. Tim Robbins.
Tim Robbins. Thank you. Tim Robbins. Vanilla Sky with Tom Cruise, also a crib of Ubik. The Matrix, obviously, and then Inception. And there's probably another one out there that's done a similar thing. I mean, there's even aspects of 12 Monkeys that has some.
I never saw that
in it. Oh, 12 Monkeys, beautiful movie. Oh my God, dude! Really? Okay, write it down. Go watch 12 Monkeys.
What do you think about James Cameron?
I think his career started out really well with T1 and 2, and I even like True Lies.
Aliens?
And then what's Alien? Oh, absolutely. Aliens is brilliant. Like, how could I forget Aliens? So certainly his career started out very, very well. And then
Titanic? Avatar?
I fucking hated Avatar. I got 40 minutes into Avatar.
The first one.
And I was and
which one? The first one? The first one?
First one. I got 40 minutes in Avatar. Ready? Another Dune callback for you, right? And he like meets up with that Navi chick, and they're like walking to her village or whatever. I don't quite remember the entire scene. But then the planet, the sprites all gather around him, and I just looked at Camille, and she looked at me, and I went, because he is the Kwisatz Haderach. And I was like, oh my fucking God, this is so goddamn cheesy. That's exactly my exact reaction. And Camille's like, fuck, you beat me to it. I'm like, I know. And then we just heckled it for the rest of the movie. We're like, oh, it's beautiful, but there's nothing here.
Did you get through it all?
Oh yeah, we got through it. And I was like, eh. And then I rarely ever turn a movie off. Like even a movie I hate, I almost always watch it all the way to the end, so that we can. Then when the movie's over, I pick up a cigar, my wife picks up her vape, we go on the friggin' porch, and then we talk about, and then we deconstruct the movie. Like that's part of what we do, right? It's just the kind of thing that we always do. We always go out to dinner after we watch, we go to the movies, or whatever. That's part of our. It's one of the things that we just really love doing together. So when we sit down and watch a film for the first time, is to go through it, especially and we have differences of opinion about film. Like I'm a much easier sell than she is. Like my wife is one of the best screen doctors that the Hollywood has never hired. She's fucking brilliant. You want to fix your movie? Hire my wife. I'm dead serious. Hire my wife, because she'll pick out every minor freaking plot hole, every minor character motivation mismatch. She's literally brilliant at it. Like she's just amazingly good at it. And every time, like, let's say, give me a perfect example. Um, we get home 1999, May of 1999. Star Wars is on my mind. So here it is. Come home from the Phantom Menace the first time. Come home, make coffee, sit in my living room, chatting about the movie. And we're all like, we're not talking about whether the movie was good, bad, or indifferent because we're all kind of still in a kind of state of shock as to what we had just seen.
What did you think
And,
about that, Tom? I mean, cutting your story off, but what did you think about that movie when it first came out?
I mean, I liked it well enough because it was Star Wars. And to me, all new Star Wars was a gift because I'm of the generation that Star Wars was done with the Return of the Jedi. Right.
I was five.
And it really
I was
was.
4 or 5. 4 or 5, I think, when Return of the Jedi came out. I remember seeing that in the theater.
I was 15. I was 15. So, but then I went to college, and I have even a really cool story about that as well. But then the novels started coming out. Most of them sucked, but then the Zahn books came out, and those were really good.
Those were good. I actually read the first one of that. It was outstanding. I don't know why they didn't adapt that and make it into a movie.
Why would you adapt it? They've already done it. Like it's a story they've already told. So in many ways, Dave Filoni is pulling bits and pieces of the Thrawn of the Zahn trilogy and putting it into the Mandalorian universe. So pulled it into Rebels textually, pulled Thrawn right into Rebels in season 3, and then has made him the big bad. And there's that whole Rebels, Ahsoka. It's going to dovetail right into what's going on with the Mandalorian. I can tell you that he's got a plan on that. It's going to culminate, over the course of the next 4 or 5 years. It's going to be really cool. But I think that's the best way to use all that material, especially Thrawn. I think they've used Thrawn very, very well. But we got home. We didn't really talk about whether the movie was good or not because we were just happy there was a Star Wars film. But then we sat down and we talked about what was being set up. And we were like, this is not going to go very well. As my wife turned to me and said, there's 1,000 Jedi. There are 2 Sith. And Anakin's supposed to bring balance to the Force. I don't know. You don't believe you understand what balance you think is going to happen here and why then. And then all the mistakes the Jedi made and all the mistakes the Jedi Council made and handing Anakin off to Obi-Wan and all this stuff. I'm like, it's all right there. Like the whole movie everything is set up in that first freaking movie from a plot perspective, which then they literally Rian Johnson takes that conversation and like puts it in the mouth of Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi, and we were like, someone else gets it. The Jedi kind of suck. They made massive mistakes. It was all wrong. I'm like, yes. Like, so I never had a problem with where The Last Jedi was taking Luke and the Jedi Order and all of that stuff because I understood that. And I didn't really understand it the way I understand it now. You've watch enough, really delve into myth and creation myth and myth of poetic storytelling and you realize the Jedi are just like every other great story about institutional collapse, be it the rise and fall of the Roman Empire or the Egyptian mythology or the Norse mythology or the Greek mythology. It's all about how the existing order becomes blind to its own ineffectuality and allows evil to rise, to destroy it, create chaos, and then we move into the next order of things. So, of course, we were going to... So that's what the Jedi were in the Star Wars films. They were the institution, and along with the Old Republic, that were tasked with keeping order in the galaxy. They became sclerotic. They became hidebound. They had deviated so far from the original Jedi teachings, and they had become kind of the religious fundamentalists of the original Jedi teachings. And all Rian Johnson was saying in The Last Jedi was, yeah, and it didn't work. And we have to go back to the original text. And in fact, we have to go back to the original text and then adapt that set of teachings and that ethos to a new circumstance, to a new generation, a new circumstance, to a new era, a new age. That's all he was saying. He wasn't saying the Jedi. He was saying those Jedi sucked. He didn't say the Jedi sucked. He said those Jedi kind of sucked. Yoda failed. Obi-Wan failed. Right? But actually, the Jedi failed because they became generals and they went and fought a war. And if you watch the Clone Wars, the comic, the animated show, they make this point abundantly clear that how the Jedi slowly but surely they lose their way, they become subsumed by Palpatine's plots to turn them into the very thing, the very opposite of that which they were supposed to be: peacekeepers, right? Mediators, not generals. And so, my problem with the prequel films is just so badly fucking written. We don't really understand what's going on because it's not written well enough to really make Anakin's, his disaffection with the Jedi really believable.
He was whiny. He was very whiny. The first episode, he was a little kid. He
was directed that way. This is Lucas's fault. Hayden Christensen was directed that way. I watched Hayden Christensen now when they bring him back now to play Anakin in like Ahsoka and even in the Obi-Wan series, which wasn't very good, but the way they bring him back in Ahsoka to teach Ahsoka in episode 5 of the Ahsoka series, they brought him back to teach Ahsoka the final lesson, or teach her the lesson that you're still thinking like the soldier I brought you up as. I brought you up to be a soldier. And you're still thinking like that, and that's not your job now. The war's over. It's a different, or if it is that war you were taught to fight, you have to become something different if you're going to be a master to someone like Sabine Wren. You just have to do so. And he, and Anakin in that episode, Hayden's great. There ain't a trace of whiny. It's more the Anakin from the Clone Wars than it is from episodes 2 or 3, or even 2 or 1 or 2, or certainly episode 2. And then he's a little bit better in episode 3. But the fundamental problem is that the script is bad, and he and Natalie Portman had zero chemistry.
Well, and I don't think people realize, like Lucas, you know this, I'm sure, but he made the good movies that he made, American Graffiti and Star Wars. He didn't direct Indiana Jones. He didn't direct Empire Strikes Back.
THX 1138 is an excellent film. Oh. His first film is excellent.
I never saw that.
THX? Oh, yeah. If you've not seen THX 1138, yeah, you should.
Who was in that?
It's a weird friggin' movie, but it's not a movie. It's an interesting little bit of sci-fi, science fiction, because it's not a movie about the future. It's a movie from the future. So it's told... It's the way THX is told as a film student, as a first film, as a film prodigy. It's fantastic. It's ultimately, is it an exercise, skill building exercise? Probably. Like Memento is that kind of thing for Christopher Nolan. I was thinking about this literally this afternoon and thinking about what we were going to talk about for this podcast, and it popped into my head, and I'm like, why do I not like Memento? Because Memento is a very emotionally manipulative film. The reason is because the way Nolan tells the story, which is out of order and actually almost backwards in time, and then we only come to find out about Guy Pearce's character. We only come to find out that this guy is a fucking serial killer because he has no memory, so he doesn't understand what's going on. So he's literally a psychopath. But we spend most of the movie, because of the way Nolan cut the movie, thinking that he's the protagonist and he's a sympathetic character when he's a fucking serial killer. And he's destroyed the lives of everyone around him. Now, the reason I personally do not like Memento, this is my personal beef with Memento. You can like the movie, I don't care. But for me, the reason why that does not work for me is that it's okay if the movie, if the bad guy in the movie, like Kylo Ren in the Star Wars films, is trying to convince you that he's right. Darth Vader is trying to convince you that he's right? That his way of doing things is right. Anakin is trying to convince you that we have to change something. That's fine. The filmmaker the way the movie is shot, the way the movie is edited, the film is positioning the camera and everything else, isn't saying he's right. The filmmaker is sitting there with the camera and framing the shot and letting you decide if he's right or not. In Memento, because of the way Nolan cut the movie, he's telling you this guy is the sympathetic character. And then it turns out that he's a mass murderer. I'm like, that's horseshit. That is, now, as a skill building exercise for a director and an editor, outstanding. If it was a student film, as you're turning into your professor to, I used to be a poet. Like I used to do skill building exercises all the time. So I'd write a villanelle. They sucked, but I'd write them. Why? Because I'd learned something about how to write the poetry I wanted to write by writing this villanelle or a sestina or sonnets or some other form, and then learn how to master the form in order to become a better overall writer, right? And Memento, from that perspective, for Chris Nolan, and from his, professional perspective, fantastic. And as a critic or as an observer, outside of just watching the movie for the sake of watching the movie and caring about the story, I'd be like, okay, you're really successful at doing that, but no one should ever fucking do that. So now you know how to do that for the bad guy. Now apply that to, the rest of your filmmaking. And then, so I don't think for example, I don't think Chris Nolan shouldn't have made Memento. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying is he needed to go through that exercise in order to learn those skills so that when he applies it to Batman, his, or whatever story, or even Tenet, which is an incredibly complex narrative, we never are confused about who the good guys are, who the bad guys are, and everything else. And so, and where the film's perspective is. We don't know this in Memento. And when I walked out of, I was so affected. I didn't walk out of it. I saw it at home. When I saw Memento for the first time, I was so offended by that film. And again, I don't like the concept of offense. So this is my fucking problem. I was so angered. I was so triggered. I was so hurt by this movie. And I'm like, I distrusted Chris Nolan up until 2017. Like, it's why I didn't want to watch Interstellar. Because I then proceeded to see elements of this in all of his other films. And I kept flashing back to am I being manipulated by this guy? Like, what's he doing here? Why is he destroying Ubik? Why is he trying now to destroy fucking Kubrick? Why is he doing this? Why is he doing that? Like, I don't get it. And it didn't square with the Chris Nolan I saw in The Prestige or Batman Begins or The Dark Knight. But The Dark Knight Rises, when it got overtly political, I couldn't quite tell what he was trying to tell me.
I couldn't either.
Was he on the side?
I couldn't either.
Oh, I know where he is now. I know for firmly this guy is exactly not a fucking Marxist at all. And once I grokked that about Chris Nolan, once I saw, and I only figured this out during the whole Chaz thing. When Seattle, they did the
occupation,
the autonomous zone within Seattle, and then I went and something triggered, something pinged me. I have to watch The Dark Knight Rises again, and then I watched it. I'm like, oh, fuck! He was warning us. This is where we were going.
The breakdown of society, and just literally just rolling into people's penthouses and just dragging them out.
It was, and I hadn't gotten it but I was so distrustful of him because of my visceral reaction to Memento that it took me 15 years to get over it, but I have, and now I watch Nolan, and now for the most part I watch Nolan, with a generous eye as opposed to a cynical one, and even with that, and then I went ahead and rewatched Inception. And I watched Interstellar, and I watched Tenet, and I watched all these movies. And I went in with a much generous read of who he was, so I finally learned to stop worrying and trust Chris Nolan. I think that's literally what I labeled the podcast that I did on this.
That was Nolan's Batmans were the first superhero movies to me where they took real life scenarios and sprinkled in a superhero character, And you know what was disappointing? I found, and I was all excited, man. David Goyer was scripting, uh, Nolan was a producer, Zack Snyder was directing Man of Steel. Do you think? I mean, do you have any excitement for the James Gunn Superman that's coming out next this summer? Because it just
Oh
seems
no,
like they can't get it
absolutely not.
right. They can't get Superman right.
No. Like, dude, as far as I'm concerned, Man of Steel is peak Superman.
Really, even over Superman two.
I love Snyder's take on Superman.
You
I
know,
absolutely adore
did you like Reeve?
all the
Did you
whole
like the Reeve?
Snyderverse.
Did you like the Reeve
I,
Supermans?
no, I'm not a Superman fan at all.
Oh,
I'm a Batman guy. So that Man of Steel was the first Superman film I ever connected with. I mean, really connected with. Um, and I thought um, that what Snyder was setting up in Man of Steel, the whole Snyderverse, I think is outstanding because I don't distrust Zack Snyder. I know where his heart is. It's like written all over his goddamn movies. It's written all over Watchmen. It's written
I
all
liked
over
Watchmen.
300. It's written all over fucking the actual cut, his cut of Sucker Punch, which that cut of Sucker Punch, his cut,
Never saw it.
great. Oh, really good. Really good. And the reason why is because it's actually talking about like it's absolutely on the side of people. It's not on the side of systems. Like he just happened they just decided to treat Superman as a person who has to become a god. And then and I just to me Henry Cavill is Superman and no one else will be. I'm dead serious. Like I have no nostalgia for the Chris Reeves movies. Um,
You saw them
I
all.
mean,
You
I
saw
thought the
you
first
saw
one,
all four of them.
I thought the first one was fun. I mean, it was good, and I love Gene Hackman in that movie, and I don't think it's a bad movie. Okay, but it's and I never really liked Superman 2, and then all the other ones just are garbage.
Yeah.
Um,
Same with the Incredible Hulk.
but
They've never been able. I like the Edward Norton one, but that's another one they've just.
I didn't see the Ed Norton one.
It was okay.
I only actually saw the Ang Lee one.
I didn't think that one was bad either.
Yeah, I didn't think it was bad. I thought it was okay. Yeah, the Eric Bana, the one with Eric Bana,
And
I thought it
Jennifer
was fine.
Connelly.
Oh,
I love Jennifer Connelly.
That's never.
I wanted to be locked in Target with her.
I watched Top Gun friggin' Maverick, and I'm like,
Loved her.
she's aged.
Yeah, I loved her in Career Opportunities. I don't know, middle school. If you remember that movie, the kid got locked into Target, and she was there. He was locked in Target with her. It's like 1989 or 88 or something.
No. Which movie was this?
It was called Career Opportunities. Right before Rocketeer, or right after Rocketeer.
Yeah, no, I didn't see that one. I've seen The Rocketeer once. I don't remember anything about it. I've seen Jennifer Connelly in a lot of things. I mean, she's not someone. I mean, she's not someone who I search out to watch. She's gorgeous. I'm not going to like lie, and she's a very good actress. But she's not somebody I search out. Like I've seen every friggin' Sandy Bullock rom-com that there is. I've seen them all, like because I have, and she's really good at it. But Jennifer Connelly's not, and the same thing with Emily Blunt. If she's in the title, if she's in the title, I'm going to probably watch it at some point. Like she has really great. The thing there is I trust Emily Blunt's taste in scripts. She has a very good. It's like Brad Pitt. Have you noticed that Brad Pitt has like really good taste in projects that he chooses?
There's so many of his movies that I haven't seen.
Me too. I haven't seen them all, but I find that in general. Brad and if you listen to Brad Pitt talk, he can't actually explain anything. He's just I don't mean this in any way derogatorily or to think that Brad Pitt is stupid or he just hasn't. He's like an idiot savant. He's like, yeah, that's the project I need to be involved in. He just like kind of instinctually knows. He's a very right brain kind of guy, and he's just very instinctual. So he's like, yeah, that one. And I think Emily Blunt has a similar talent. Like she knows which projects she's taking on are just kind of fluff, like the Jungle Cruise with Dwayne Johnson, which is a perfectly acceptable piece of Disney fluff. But then, Mary Poppins Returns, Edge of Tomorrow with Tom Cruise, like Looper, Ryan Johnson's Looper, amazing work. Like a little movie I said earlier, Sunshine Cleaning with the Adjustment Bureau with Matt Damon. It was a Philip K. Dick adaptation. Not a bad movie. I'm not even a huge fan of Matt Damon.
What
They were
about
good
what
together.
do you think about Tarantino?
There's a complicated question for you because I used to really like Tarantino.
Oh, so oh, go ahead.
I can't watch any of his films anymore. And I'll give you a perfect example. And it's going to dovetail with my discussions about Memento. What Memento did was to make you a party to and complicit with all of Leonard's crimes by making you it corrupts you. That's my problem with Memento. It's why you don't make movies like that. Tarantino goes out of his way to corrupt his viewer into the world of his characters. And he's like stated this explicitly. And because of that, I can't watch his movies with the same enthusiasm I used to. I think Pulp Fiction is a great movie. I think Reservoir Dogs is a great movie. I still have a real soft spot for Inglourious Bastards, but mostly because as a writer, I can see what he's doing.
Jackie Brown.
Jack Brown, not interested in. Kill Bill has fallen off my it's fallen off my radar. And I saw The Hateful Eight.
I never
I
saw
saw it in
that.
theaters. Saw it in 70 millimeter down in Tampa. I have not seen anything since. I did not like Django Unchained.
Never saw that.
I haven't seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
I like that. What about the screenplays he wrote?
True Romance is great,
Yeah.
but Tony Scott saved the movie. The director. Tony Scott decided Clarence should live at the end of True Romance. Tarantino wanted to kill him. And Tony Scott fought with Tarantino and fought with him and fought with him and fought with him until finally Tony Scott said, okay, Quentin, I will film your ending and I will film my ending. And then we'll watch them back to back. And you tell me which one is the better ending. And Tarantino relented and said Tony Scott's ending was the better ending. These kids deserved a happy ending. There was no reason. That movie was shot as a fairy tale. There was absolutely no reason for that movie to end the way Tarantino wanted it, which was as Clarence gets killed and in the final shootout, and Alabama drives off with a voiceover that is very dismissive of Clarence not being there for her anymore. And it was like, that was tonally completely out of that. If Tarantino had directed the movie, it would have been in place, but it was not the movie that Tony Scott made to that point. And so tonally, Tony Scott was right. And for that reason, True Romance is now a classic. And, and Natural Born Killers is not.
I hated that movie. Is that what led? Do you think is True Romance what led James Gandolfini to Sopranos? That role?
Probably. And Gandolfini was phenomenal in The Sopranos.
But I wonder if that was a segue to Sopranos.
Maybe. I don't know. I know that watching The Sopranos, I binged, I think, the first 4 seasons. Oh, no, the first 3 seasons. We got into season 4, and I had to stop. And I haven't picked it up since. Because once it started with all of his trusted mates started betraying him, I was like, I can't watch this.
It jumped the shark. Season 4 jumped the shark.
I couldn't watch it after that.
So you never finished it?
No, I got 3 episodes into season 4 and I stopped.
I hated season 4.
This is too painful for me. I can't watch this. Silvio and all of them, they start betraying Tony behind his back, and I'm like,
to me,
textually is correct. But I mean, I understood why it was happening, but I'm like, I can't watch this. This personally, I've been betrayed by too many people in my life close to me. I've been betrayed by my family. I can't watch it. And so I don't judge The Sopranos when I say I haven't been able to watch it. I'm not judging it. I'm just telling you what my reaction was. And
what made that show so dynamic to me was the relationship between him and his mother. And when that woman that played the mother died right after season 2, and they had to hologram her in that one episode of season 3 and killing off her character, the whole dynamic of the show changed. But what was brilliant about that season was the mistress was the mother's character, the way she would talk to him, and I was like, wow, they really adapted. And then season 4 came out. I only watched it once, and I was like, God, this
Right.
fucking just fell off a cliff. But season 5, they did kind of recalibrate. They brought Robert Loggia in, but he was only in for like 3 episodes. So
Doesn't matter. Robert Loggia, 3 episodes of Robert Loggia is better than 0
and
episodes
watching
of
him
Robert Loggia. Like, that's fucking great.
and Buscemi they brought in too. So I would tell you, I mean, skip season 4 and go to season 5 because
You can't. You have to watch the whole fucking thing.
Yeah, I know.
You got to.
Yeah, season 5, and then to me after season 5, then it was just
I don't know. I've heard from people whose opinions on this stuff I really, really respect. They are like, The Sopranos is top tier all the way through to the end, and that comes from Dexter White. It comes from a couple of other people, and these are people that I rarely. There are very few people who I have a whose advice I take on film and television. Sorry, it's just the way it is. If they recommend something to me, I'm like, okay, it's like I have to watch that. And their opinions on this stuff are now that's not to say that I agree with everything that they say, but if they are recommending something to me, I'm like, okay, I have to watch that, even if I turn out that I don't like it, at the very least, right? Yeah. So I will finish The Sopranos at some point. It's just not yet.
what about Boardwalk?
So,
Did you watch Boardwalk Empire?
did not watch Boardwalk. I watched The Wire.
Never watched The Wire.
I only watched The Wire recently. I watched it over last summer. Wire was excellent. Really, really good.
But you're not into the mob stuff, so Boardwalk Empire is probably not on your priority list.
Yeah, and again, mob stuff is fine for what it is. It's like it's not. Yeah, I mean, I'm much more of a genre guy. I really, I mean, when I sit down to watch, I choose to watch stuff now. I'm really watching a lot of genre stuff. Like I went ahead and rewatched all of the Ghost in the Shell standalone complexes recently. So my anime, I don't have a lot of anime under my belt, but what I watched recently, rewatched the whole thing, including all of it, like from not just SAC season 1 and 2, standalone complex seasons 1 and 2, but I went back and rewatched Arise, and I actually started from the beginning and started watching from Arise Border 1, which is the first story chronologically, all the way through to the end, and then watched the original movie, which was the end of her story, and then everything they produced ever since then has been a prequel to bring you to the point where Motoko jumps into the net, and so I watched it all the way through that way to see all these different creators and all these different and all these different art styles and everything else. So watch to see how well they did in bringing the character from point A to point end. It's actually quite impressive. And it was really good. Rewatched BSG recently. That was phenomenal. Rewatched Babylon 5 with my daughter. If I've seen Babylon 5 once, I've watched it 30 times. I'm not kidding. At one point when it was coming out, it was like literally I had it. The only thing I had on videotape, I didn't have cable. I had my friends would tape it for me, and I would just rewatch B5 over and over again. And I had Dennis Miller Live. Somebody would like Dennis Miller's old HBO talk show. I used to watch that all the time too. That was it. I mean, that's all we had. So I watched B5 like over and over again.
You know what I've rewatched recently? And 2 Clint Eastwood movies, man. Dirty Harry and Unforgiven.
Now, Dirty Harry's a great movie.
I never saw the other ones.
Unforgiven is one of the greatest westerns ever made. Oh, by the way, we have now touched on almost every movie that David Peoples has had a hand in the screenplay of. Blade Runner, Unforgiven, 12 Monkeys. There's another movie called Blood of Heroes, which he actually directed, which with Rucker Hauer and Joan Chen. Not a bad little movie either. And only I think there's 1 or 2 others, and that's it. And then Peoples is another one of these guys who writes great stuff every once in a while. Like he only works on screenplays that are, or at least I don't know if he's still alive or still writing or whatnot, but every one of the movies that he's been involved in are top tier. He's that good a writer. So,
You an Eastwood guy?
oh yeah, huge Clint Eastwood fan.
Directing from acting. See, I only saw Dirty Harry. I never saw the other Dirty Harry movies?
I've seen them all. I've seen every Dirty Harry movie. I've seen Magnum. I own Magnum Force. I think I own Magnum Force. I think I got like a two, yeah, like the first two on Blu-ray or 4K, like recently for like $12 or some shit like that. So I have Dirty Harry and Magnum Force. Magnum Force isn't bad. The Enforcer's pretty good. Interestingly enough, that's with him and Tyne Daly. And so there's a, dealing with in 1975 women on the police force with Dirty Harry. It's hilarious. Yeah, I mean, I've seen them all. I've seen Sudden Impact. I've seen
Deadpool.
the Deadpool. Yeah, I saw Deadpool in the theater with my dad actually, because my dad was a huge Clint Eastwood fan. So we'd watch all, we did. This is what we did. We went to see. I know I saw Pale Rider with him in the theater.
I never saw that either.
What's that?
I never saw Pale Rider.
It's not great, but yeah, Pale Rider's good. Nothing like a good piece of hickory. One of the best. It's like a classic Clint Eastwood line.
And what was his directorial? Was it Heartbreak Ridge or White Hunter Black Heart? Was the first movie he directed?
Both.
He directed both.
The first movie he directed is Play Misty for Me. It goes back to 1969.
Never saw that.
He's been actually neither of all. I have seen Play Misty for Me. He's a radio jock and he's getting stalked by a chick. Clint made a lot of movies. He directed a lot of movies. Outlaw Josie Wales, he directed that. He directed. I know he directed Sudden Impact. Go look at Eastwood's. I think he directed High Plains Drifter as well, and I'm almost positive he did. That's a great movie.
I never saw any of those either.
Oh yeah, you should watch High Plains Drifter. That's a great movie. Yeah.
What about he went through a stretch in the 90s where every movie he was directing was Best Picture nominated or won.
They were good. I mean, he was on a roll in the 1990s between Unforgiven, which he finally won the Oscar for. I mean, and he made a lot of like minor films. He made Power and Blood Work, and I watched them all. I mean, Clint's Absolute Power was
Absolute Power was great. That was great.
It was an excellent movie. Like fucking Gene Hackman. Like get Gene Hackman. Like you put Gene Hackman in a movie, it's going to be better. It's just going to be better.
Did you ever hear the story? I've interrupted. Did you ever hear the story when he was doing Hoosiers? How miserable he was shooting it, and Dennis Hopper showed up. He was in Indiana, wherever they were filming it in rural Indiana, and Dennis Hopper shows up. He was so pissed off until Dennis Hopper came on set, and he looked at Dennis Hopper. He goes, "This will be like," and I'm paraphrasing. He's like, "This will be the worst fucking movie. This, hopefully you have money saved because this is the end of our career." And they brought him back. They brought him back to watch the final version, and he looked at the director or the editor or whoever, and he said, "How the hell did you pull this off?" He said he needed the money. That's the only reason why he took it.
It's funny. I've never seen Hoosiers.
It's great.
But I love Gene Hackman. I know Space Cowboys was fun. How
about In the Line of Fire?
Then he did like $1 Million. Then he retires, but then he comes back to do $1 Million Baby. Now, I didn't like Mystic River.
I never saw that. I never saw Mystic River.
Mystic River was okay, but Mystic River is a very, very dark. It's a really dark film about, it's a very dark film. And it leaves you with a very bad taste in your mouth. And I'm glad that wasn't his final film for a variety of reasons. But that was supposed to be, he was going to retire at that point. And then he got the script from Paul Schrader for $1 Million Baby. And he's like, I have to make this movie. And then he did. And then he won Hilary Swank the Oscar because that movie's unbelievable.
Phenomenal.
And then, then he went back. Then he just got back behind the camera and kept working. Good for Clint. And he's made some good movies since then. And,
I loved him in Richard. I loved the Richard Jewell that he directed.
I didn't see it.
So here's what's funny about that. I've never shared this with anybody on here. So when I first started this podcast, this is year 7, and I was doing them all in person 6 years ago. So it would have been the summer. It would have been spring of 18. I would go to LA and just hang out, and I would try to connect with people through Instagram. So this guy named Paul Walter Hauser, who I ended up connecting with him on Instagram. We were messaging back and forth. I met him at the ArcLight Cinema. We recorded just the audio because I wasn't doing video back then, and we were in person. A month later, he's on set in Atlanta. He was the star of that movie.
Right. Wow. Nice.
It was unbelievable.
Happens.
I'm like, and he didn't say anything. He didn't indicate anything. But it
Right.
was literally 4 weeks after we recorded. He was on set.
Nice.
That movie was fantastic.
Mm. It just slipped through the cracks. Like they're just, like everything else. Things just slip through the cracks, and you're just like, yeah, I need to watch it. Yeah, okay, I'll get to it. Yeah, no offense to Clint or anything, but I haven't seen every one of your movies. I probably should, but I haven't.
In the Line of Fire was another one that was phenomenal.
In the Line of Fire, but that's just him acting. That was Wolfgang Peterson. Yeah,
Was that Wolfgang? That was Wolfgang Peterson.
That's probably the last decent movie Wolfgang Peterson made. To be honest with you,
because he did
that was a good.
He did We Were Soldiers, right? I think he did We Were Soldiers and Mel Gibson.
Was that him or was that Randall?
Oh, you're right. You're right.
Whatever. I don't remember his last name.
You might be right.
I'll be honest with you. It's like if Mel Gibson is in the credits on the movie, I want to watch it, but I know that Mel has made a lot of really crappy movies recently. If you've not seen Fat Man with Mel Gibson, that's a quirky little movie where he plays Santa Claus.
Is it old?
No, it's like 6-7 years ago. It's a quirky freaking movie. It is an odd movie about a young kid who wants to kill Santa Claus, played by Mel Gibson.
He's doing a Lethal Weapon 5. He's directing it.
Is he?
I heard him in an interview.
I love it. I absolutely love, and that it's going to be about it's going to be about child trafficking. You just know fucking full well that it's going to be. And he's directing it.
That's what he said that Dick Donner had started it and asked Mel Gibson, if I die, finish this and direct it.
Oh, okay. Well, good for Mel. I find Mel to be just refreshing in his. Because look, the man got fuck you money with The Passion of the Christ, so doesn't need Hollywood. They need him. He can do whatever the hell he wants. He can make whatever bad movie he wants. They want to blacklist me, blacklist me. I don't give a shit. I have fuck you money. I have more money than the studios have right now because he made $1 billion off that freaking movie.
Yeah.
Right. So
some of my favorite movies though growing up he was a part of. Like I love Lethal Weapon. I love Lethal Weapon 2. I love the third one I thought was good. Fourth one,
Yeah, third one was fun. Yeah. Well, yeah, the best part of Lethal Weapon 4 was Jet Li. The worst part of Lethal Weapon 4 was Jet Li because now we had to credibly believe that Mel Gibson could go into hand-to-hand combat with Jet Li, right? No. It's like anybody fighting Donnie Yen and not immediately being killed. So I'll tell you what I'm really looking forward to. Speaking of Donnie Yen, is I'm really looking forward to the second season of Andor, Star Wars Andor.
Never saw it.
Okay, if you've not watched season 1 of Andor, give Disney your fucking money for a month and watch the fucking thing. If you liked Rogue One, and even if you didn't see Rogue One, do that. You must watch Andor season 1, and I mean that sincerely. And there's no reason, no matter how much you might have fallen out with Disney and Lucasfilm, it doesn't matter. Andor is superlative. It's not even necessarily superlative Star Wars. It is superlative Star Wars, but it is
better than Rogue One. Tom, was it better than Rogue One? I loved Rogue One.
It's telling Cassian Andor's backstory. So now let's set the stage. Set 5 years before Rogue One. Season 1 tells the story of how Cassian Andor, street thief, ne'er-do-well, becomes a member of the rebels. Season 2, which is due to start in March or April of next year, it's already done. They're in post-production. The way Andor was originally laid out, it was 12 episodes, and each 3 episodes were like a mini movie, like a part of a story arc, right? Not quite. The first 2 are that way. Then there's a 1 episode interim. Then there's a 2 episode arc, and then there's our 3 episode arc, and it moves into the end. Season 2, Tony Gilroy, who's the showrunner on this, first 3 episodes are 4 years before Rogue One. Next 3 episodes, 3 years before Rogue One. Then 2, then 1, And from what we understand, and Gilroy's already said this, is that we will leave Cassian at the end of the second season of Andor, and as it ends, literally as we pick him up in Rogue One. So what I've heard, the rumor is that they are going to time a re-release of Rogue One in the theaters to coincide with the end of Andor season 2, so you can watch Andor season 2 and then go see Rogue One in the theaters as one big thing. I am really looking forward to that. If season 2 is half as good as season 1, it'll be the best thing that Disney's produced. That's how good Andor is, because it is the best thing that Disney's produced. It's better than Rogue One because it's got depth. It's got a depth to it, and I don't actually think that Rogue One is the best thing that the Disney has done, but I like Rogue One a lot. I think it's, I know full well it was saved in the edit and a variety of other things. It was saved in reshoots and a variety of other things. And so tonally it's a little inconsistent here and there, but I love the movie. Don't get me wrong. Like that's as much as I love Rogue One, I think Andor is better. And I think that it's equivalent to some of the best stuff that they've done in the animated department. I really do. I have sincere, love for Star Wars Rebels, season 7 of the Clone Wars. Like the stuff that they've done is, especially in animated. And I'll be honest with you, the older I get, the more I think about it, the more I really like Star Wars as animated storytelling. I like it a lot more actually than live action. Because in an animated context, we get to divorce ourselves from all of our preconceptions of what is and is not Star Wars. And by the way, I happen to think that The Last Jedi is one of the best Star Wars movies ever made. I still think it's Star Wars, Empire, The Last Jedi, Rogue One. That's my arg. That's the way it goes for me.
Do you not like Return of the Jedi?
It's like number 7.
Number 7.
I like the last third of Return of the Jedi. I think the last act of Return of the Jedi is excellent.
You don't like the Jabba the Hutt?
No, the Jabba the Hutt sequence is terrible. I just don't think it's a particularly good. I just don't think it's. I think it's a movie that was designed to sell toys, and that Lucas didn't really have much of a plan going in. He just knew what the ending was going to be, and then he recycled a whole bunch of ideas in order to get to the end because he was already done with Star Wars and into empire building, meaning he was building out Lucasfilm. And you can tell there's a tonal shift in the Return of the Jedi that is real and abiding, and he hired the wrong director because he didn't want to spend a whole lot of money on a good director. And taking nothing away from Richard Marquand, who was originally hired to direct the movie, but he was fired, and George Lucas actually wound up directing most of Return of the Jedi.
Well, I didn't know that. Because Irwin Kershner, did they not want to pay him? Because he went and did Never Say Never Again.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't.
He did RoboCop 2?
Yeah, I know. It was a terrible movie. RoboCop 2 was awful. Yeah, I mean, Kirsch was, and he did, but Kirsch was hired to do Star Wars. Steven Spielberg wanted to direct Return of the Jedi, but he couldn't get out of his Directors Guild contract. The Directors Guild wouldn't give him a variance because Lucas would not have, the Directors Guild of America at the time. The movie had to have opening credits, and the last opening credit before the movie starts had to be directed by. That was the rule. And Lucas, because he was independently producing the Star Wars films outside of the Hollywood legal structure, could broke with that. And that's part of the reason why Star Wars, blew people's fucking minds. Part of it was just because it just starts, right? And it was completely shocking in 1977 to have a movie start that way. But Spielberg desperately wanted to direct Return of the Jedi. But he couldn't, but he would have had to leave the Directors Guild to do so because, and he wasn't willing to. I think he was actually the president of the Directors Guild Association at the time. So he probably, or the chair, something like that. So Lucas, I'll be honest with you, there's a lot of talk about why is Gary Kurtz's name why is he not the producer of Return of the Jedi? He produced the first 2 movies. But he had a falling out with Lucas because Lucas decided to cheapen out make sure that there were enough things to sell toy wise, because Lucas was trying to monetize the shit out of the movie in order to build out the Lucasfilm and Skywalker Ranch and ILM and everything else. And he wanted to make sure he had enough capital to do so. He was also very scared because he nearly went broke self-financing The Empire Strikes Back, because Kirshner ran like 25% over budget. He ran, they started with a budget of like $25 million. And I think Kirshner wound up spending something closer to 35 to make Empire. There were massive cost overruns. Lucas was self-financing it because, and so, and George just talks about all this stuff now. He finally comes clean on all that. He didn't come clean about the whole firing Richard Marquand until after Richard died. And again, taking nothing away from Richard Marquand, he was a perfectly serviceable BBC, period piece director. He made a couple of halfway decent movies, taking nothing away from the man. But he was the wrong choice for Return of the Jedi. But he came cheap. And Gary Kurtz walked off of Return of the Jedi because Lucas wasn't focused on making the best Star Wars movie he could. He was interested in making the most profitable Star Wars movie he could, all told. That includes merchandising, marketing, and everything else. Because he had a plan, and that plan was to put Star Wars to bed. He was already Star Wars. As far as Lucas was concerned, he was already past Star Wars by the time. So that's why Return of the Jedi feels like a lazy movie. And it is a lazy movie. It's lazily directed, it's lazily edited, it's lazily acted, until you get to the end of it, where we got the Emperor and Vader and Luke, and that shit's brilliant. And the space battle's really good. ILM did their best work, and but he had to. So Lucas didn't reshoot any of the stuff that Marquand shot. What he did was he shot the rest of the movie like Richard Marquand shot the early Jabba the Hutt sequences. And it shows, because it doesn't make, it's tonally, it's all wrong. I was talking with Joe Mazzoli, the showrunner from Stargate, on Twitter about this, because he and I are Twitter mates. And he's like, Tom, I really want to do a Spaces with you where you defend Return of the Jedi for me, because I think it's the movie that ruined Star Wars. I'm like, sounds great. I actually really want to talk about The Last Jedi more, but because it's more controversial. And Joe's like, yeah, but I never watched another Star Wars movie after the fucking Ewoks. I'm like, all right, well, okay, never mind. We'll pick something. We'll do something. We'll do another one another day. But
I was like, are you guys going to do that?
By the way, he's Baron Destructo on Twitter. He's fucking awesome, by the way.
Add him right now.
Joe Mazzoli is great. You should give him a follow on Twitter. He did a watch an episode of the Twilight Zone per day, and then a review of the Twilight Zone. And now he's doing the Outer Limits.
What's his Twitter handle, Tom?
Baron Destructo. Yeah. So that guy's he's really, really good. So no, Return of the Jedi is not in my, it's not as bad as Attack of the Clones, and it's not as bad as The Phantom Menace. But I'll be honest with you, I like The Phantom Menace best of all the prequel films, because it's the film that George Lucas wanted to make, warts and all. It's the most tonally consistent of all three films. It's the least of all the prequel films. It's the one that has the least amount of, I'm not sure if I should do this because the fans are really angry with me. And if I don't ever anybody remembers just how fucking angry the fans were during the prequel films. I remember, for example, Chris Gore, when he was writing for Film Threat, titled his fucking review, "George Lucas Raped My Childhood." Okay, with The Phantom Menace. And I literally had people saying to me the other day on Twitter, when I was trying to defend The Last Jedi mildly, and I just wanted to see what would happen, literally people saying that right back to me. I'm like, dude, I was there in 1999 and everybody was doing this. No, by the way, I was old enough to remember when we were all really weirded out as 13-year-olds or 12-year-olds at The Empire Strikes Back. The Empire Strikes Back was not universally loved in 1980. By the way, it got grudgingly positive reviews, by the way. And a lot of people were really angry that it ended on a cliffhanger. They had to defend it. I remember reading all because I was a huge Star Wars fan. I was like, I ate, lived, and breathed Star Wars at 13 years old. Like my whole, it's like my life sucked outside of Star Wars. My family, my home life is awful, And I mean, for a middle class white guy from the burbs, like let's not kid ourselves. It's not like people were being not like we were being robbed every other day, and but it was just a tough time for our family. And the Star Wars was the one bright spot in my entire life, from my perspective. And the Empire Strikes Back was a difficult swallow. I went into, like everybody else, I went into Return of the Jedi going, they're going to tell me that that Vader's not his father. And no, he doubles down. Not only is Vader his father, but Leia's his sister, which is fucking stupid. Anybody who sits there and tells me that Lucas had a fucking plan with the original films and that he had it scripted out that Leia was Luke's sister, go fuck yourself. That's just bullshit. Like, that's complete fucking nonsense. Lucas, like, flat out said, I had to have a backup in case Mark Hamill decided not to come back for the third movie. I had to finish it somehow. And that's the whole reason why Yoda says there is another. It's simply because they weren't sure if Mark Hamill was going to be willing to come back to do the third movie or not. Now, thankfully, since Mark Hamill is quite a marginal actor outside of Star Wars and the Joker, he had nowhere else to go.
You mean Corvette Summer? Corvette Summer.
To come back.
Who?
He didn't. He was done with it. Harrison Ford didn't want to come back for Return of the Jedi. He was done. I mean, he was Rick Deckard at that point. He was Indiana Jones. He had no desire to come back and do another Star Wars film. He's like, bring me back, but kill me off, please. Make my character have an arc and have some meaning. It shows his performance. It's literally the worst performance of Harrison Ford's career.
It's amazing he's still out there. He's in new Captain America 4.
He's 82. Yeah.
I mean, he's another one. Some of the greatest movies of my childhood. Teen years. The Fugitive, Presumed Innocent, Witness.
Oh God, The Fugitive is a great. If y'all haven't watched The Fugitive, like, oh my God. So here's a great story. You want to hear a story about a movie that was saved in the edit? Go watch The Fugitive. Then go watch some YouTubes about the making of that movie. And you'll be like, you talk about how they saved Hoosiers, right? Oh, no. Like, the whole of The Fugitive was being written on the fly as they walked around. They were all just kind of collaborating. Half of the dialogue in the movie is ad-libbed by like Tommy Lee Jones's lieutenants, like Joe Pantaleone and the black chick. I don't know her. I don't know the actor. I don't know the actors. All the actors' names. But all those guys, that's all ad-libbed. They just knew their characters, and they just did stuff. Like all that dialogue is just kind of, that whole movie was just kind of made up as they went along. They just solved script problems on a day-to-day basis as they were making the movie. Complete collaborative effort between all the creatives involved on set, the director, the screenwriter, the actors, and they somehow made a movie.
Who do you think, you doing okay on time? Who do you think of the action stars was more talented or had a better career, Stallone or Schwarzenegger?
Wow, that's a tough choice because I don't really like either of them very much. Probably, I that's a hard choice because I don't seek out. I mean, Arnie doesn't really bother me, but I actively avoided Stallone for quite a long time. I think Demolition Man is fun. Well, it's got Sandra Bullock in it, so I'm going to have a hard time with that. And I think Wesley Snipes steals the friggin' movie, of course. You
don't like the original Rocky? You don't like First Blood?
Oh no, I love the original Rocky. We watched that recently. My wife had never seen it, so we watched Rocky one night. She was like, "Wow, this movie is great." I'm like,
second one was good.
Really? What's that?
Second one was all right.
So the second one was good, but the second one was kind of fan service. Rocky needed to win.
Yeah. And the third one, it went comic book, and the fourth one, it went really comic book.
Yeah. They went comic book after that, and same thing with the Rambo films. Like, I think First Blood is a great movie,
fantastic.
But but First Blood Part 2 is awful, and everything else after that is awful. But First Blood is a great movie. the evil Brian Dennehy was a great choice of casting. Because before that, Brian Dennehy had never played anybody like that before. Like, it was a great cast against type. I mean, Brian Dennehy was a great character actor at that era. He was in his prime as an actor. You know, he was in his prime. He was in every other movie. You know, 10th, 7th, 6th, 7th build, whatever. He was everywhere. Like Charles Durney at one point was also, you know, he's just kind of everywhere. Always elevating the material. I guess guys like, you know, M. Emmett Walsh, Neil McDonough, and others, guys like that, they're everywhere, right? For a long time, Gary Sinise was that way as well. And casting Brian Dennehy as the bad guy in that movie was a stroke of fucking brilliance, because we had never seen him in that kind of role. And the classic example is Hitchcock casting Jimmy Stewart in Rear Window, where we realized that Jimmy Stewart is the bad guy, right? Like, the perfect cast against type is to have Jimmy Stewart be the bad guy. Now, they tried that a couple times with Harrison Ford. The first time they did it with Presumed Innocence, it didn't work. No one believed that Harrison Ford killed Greta Scott. There's no fucking way. We never in a million years believed it. But when we get to What Lies Beneath, the Robert Zemeckis film he made with Michelle Pfeiffer, that was honestly a shock.
I never saw that.
Oh, that's a good movie. And and Zemeckis' work is very up and down for me. Some of it is brilliant, like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and but obviously Back to the Future and whatnot. But that's a good movie. Once he gets away from Spielberg and he starts making a lot of his own films, his work is, he chooses interesting projects after that, and some of them are very good. I didn't really follow him very closely. Every once in a while, I'm like, oh, Bob Zemeckis made that movie. Okay, cool.
One of the Stallone movies I thought was, I don't know if it was under the radar at the time, but it's one of my favorites is Nighthawks.
Nighthawks was a great movie. Rutger Hauer's first American film. That's a great movie. Don't remember who the director is. I should know who the director of that film is because I've seen it enough times. I've watched Nighthawks probably 12 times.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, excellent film. So, funny story about that one. So, every year Star Wars are getting re-released in the theaters. So my dad loved movies. So one Friday, I think my dad this would be 1982, right? Nighthawks is 1982. Yeah. Or 81. What year did Excalibur come out? I think it was 81. Basically, my dad takes me up to the Sixplex up in Poughkeepsie so I can go see Star Wars, right? I come out, I watch Star Wars. He goes and watches, Excalibur. So the John Boorman movie. I'm like, okay. I come out and I'm like, Dad, can I go watch Star Wars again? And he's like, okay. Oh, no, the first movie he watched was Nighthawks. The second movie he watched was Excalibur. So we just spent the day at the movie theaters. My dad was I give it up for my dad on that one. He was quite the trooper that day. That's a great story. And that's one of them. And eventually I wound up seeing it later on because we were the first people on the block with a VCR. And then of course my dad was like, well, if we rent these fucking movies, we should get a second VCR so we can tape them so we don't have to rent them again. So I was the keeper of the VCR collection of the movie and I taped everything we rented. So I went to college with this massive movie library, 250 films. Like everything we rented, no matter how bad it was, I taped it. So I had everything. I had copies of Blade Runner, Brazil, you name it. I had all the Clint Eastwood movies, The Godfather, all of it.
Do you still have them?
Like,
do you have those tapes anymore?
No. I had The Guns of Navarone. I had all my father's favorite war movies, Patton, which I wore out because I've seen Patton so many fucking times. Breaker Morant, great fucking movie. If you've never seen Breaker Morant, the Bruce Beresford movie about the Boer War. I was just telling a friend of mine about that last night. That's a movie you got to watch. Never seen Breaker Morant. You have to see Breaker Morant.
What about as we're in the Christmas season? Do you like any of that stuff? Christmas Story, Vacation, Wonderful Life?
I never watch any Christmas. I never really, and I don't watch Die Hard during Christmas. I don't really watch Christmas movies. What I'll do during Christmas is more home. We'll catch up, and I'll be honest with you. I usually wind up watching a Star Wars or two during Christmas. That's what I usually wind up doing. But since I packed up most of my DVD library, all right, Blu-ray library, because we're like we're fixing up the house to get it ready for sale so we can move to Tennessee, and I've got a lot of stuff in storage already because we needed to clear the house out because there's a lot of work that needs to be done interior on the house. And I've cut off Disney, and I've cut off all my streaming services on Amazon Prime. I don't know what I'm going to do. So I just bought Andor season 1 on Blu-ray, and I just bought Ahsoka, so I'll probably watch those. And I left out for me to watch all the whole Snyderverse and the recent Planet of the Apes movies, because the Matt Reeves Planet of the Apes movies are phenomenal.
Phenomenal.
Rise, phenomenal. The Batman, I just picked up Matt Reeves, the Batman.
I didn't like that.
I loved it.
Did you watch all the Penguin then?
I have not watched the Penguin because I just haven't.
If you get rid of
Again,
Max.
I stopped. I'll be honest with you. I started playing World of Warcraft again, and I'm playing with my daughter and a couple of patrons and whatnot. Haven't been watching anything recently. Like, my wife's been rewatching House for like the third or fourth time. So we're like in the middle of season 7 of House. I watch a couple episodes with her every once in a while, but I haven't watched anything else recently at all. Like in the last 2 months, I haven't. That's like, I maybe watched, I don't know, 15, 16 episodes of House. That's pretty much it.
Who directed that? Was that somebody
What?
who directed House? Or
Talking
who,
about the
creator?
the show, the Hugh Laurie show, the procedural about him as the doctor.
Yeah, was that Sam Raimi though that wrote it?
He
or?
never directed it. He never directed House. No.
Do you know what he directed that I never realized was Darkman?
Yeah, great movie.
It's a great movie. I saw that in the theater.
Yeah, so did I. It was the first time I ever saw Liam Neeson. Actually, the second time I saw Liam Neeson, because I did see him in the Deadpool with Clint Eastwood. He was the bad guy in the Deadpool.
You didn't see him in Justine Bateman's Satisfaction? He was the bar
I
owner.
did not, and that's a real oversight, considering that I like everybody else discovered Justine Bateman after the election on Twitter, and she's phenomenal. And I'm like, yeah, I know why I watch Family Ties.
I didn't realize.
It wasn't for Tina Yothers, folks. So.
No, I didn't realize how conservative she was either until this recent election.
Yeah, no, she's just like, I just thought her whole Twitter series on giving script notes to all the TikTok videos were phenomenal. But Joe Mazzoli, again, I'll bring Joe back up, during the Trump assassination, and while all the stuff that's happening, and we're getting all the bad information we're getting from the Trump assassination, all the lies and everything else, Joe Mazzoli was literally doing script notes, the series of posts of script notes about the story that they're trying to concoct for us, and it fucking hilarious. Absolutely fucking hilarious about all the plot holes and all this stuff. Like, dude, it would. He did like 3 or 4 of these, and they were just like every 4 or 5 days he would do another one. And he said, "Nope. So I appreciate you as the writer, like filling in this thing here." And it was like literally reading. I sent those over to Dexter White. I sent the tweet over to Dexter White, and he's like, "Okay, whoever that guy is," because he doesn't know who Joe Mazzoli is. He's like, "Whoever that guy is has obviously been in a room with a bunch of smarmy fucking studio." Except like, dude, that's the showrunner from Stargate SG-1. He's like, "Okay, yeah, that guy's been in the room." I'm like, he's hilarious. He's awesome. So huge, it's funny. I told him, I said, "Dude, I'm a huge fan of like his show Dark Matter was excellent. I really like Stargate Atlantis." He's like, mutually, it's cool. It's nice to find a mutual appreciation society, and some of the people that are actually out there working professionally. It's nice to catch up with some of them. I made friends with Brendan McCarthy, the great comic book artist, over some of my early work, and he just thought I was gonna, and then he actually DM'd me one day, and he's like, "So I'm and I'm the guy who wrote Fury Road with George Miller." I'm like, okay. And I'm like, we were going to do a podcast actually about all of this stuff. We were going to talk about, Fury Road and comic books and a whole bunch of stuff. And then he couldn't get his laptop microphone working, so we had to bag it. We couldn't get any audio. It was really sad. I would loved to just picked his brain about Alan Moore and Grant Morrison and all my favorite. These are all because he knows all of my favorite, because he's worked with all of my favorite comic book writers. So it would have been a really cool thing. We never did
Are you a
get
Star
around to doing
Trek
it.
person?
I am not. I am a Star Wars
So
fan.
not Star
I
Trek at
understand.
all? You know, like Wrath of Khan
I
or
mean, bits and pieces of Star Trek I like. I mean, I'm very choosy about what I think is good and isn't. For the most part, I understand that Star Trek was um gestated by the CIA. Um, Sorry, folks, it just was. Um, Roddenberry was a fucking asset, and but aspects of the original Star Trek are really are good. I'm not a big fan of original recipe, but extra crispy, which is what we called Star Trek and Star Trek: The Next Generation was original recipe and extra crispy. Like I think there's a couple of really good seasons of TNG, like the Klingon Civil War stuff in seasons 3 and 4. I think they're really good. I think the rest of the show is shit. I never liked Voyager. I never did see Deep Space Nine because I know that they were ripping off Babylon 5, and I'm a huge Babylon 5 fan. I didn't have fucking time for Star Trek. Some of the movies are good. I like I like everybody else. I like Wrath of Khan. I think Search for Spock's not bad. Um, I like The Undiscovered Country. That was a good movie. There may be one or two of the Next Generation films that aren't bad. I think the one with the Borg Queen's pretty good.
did you
Um,
see the recent 7-minute video they put out?
no, I have no idea.
So they did a and William Shatner participated in it, and
Mm.
it's a 7 or 8 minutes long where next, and I never saw any of the Patrick Stewart stuff, but I know William Shatner was brought into the first Patrick Stewart movie, Generations, I think it
Yes,
was, and he died, and his
yes,
character he died in it. So this
right,
video takes place right after he is dying, and he's going into the afterlife, and he walks through the different portals of James Kirk's life. So he's looking at
right.
himself. They do the de aging. He looks at
Mhm.
himself from the '60s show. The woman that played Savick in Search for Spock, because remember Kirstie Alley wanted too
Kirstie
much.
Alley, yeah,
She didn't come back for
yep.
for that. So that
Nope.
woman reprises the role in it. And then the
Mhm.
ending scene is Spock laying on not his casket but his deathbed, and they
Mhm.
look at each other and like grip hands. There's no speaking. It's only 7 minutes
That's good.
long.
That's cool.
I'll have to
That's a
find it and
cool thing.
DM it to you.
Yeah, yeah. Please do that. I'd like to watch that. I mean, get me wrong. I really enjoyed J.J. Abrams' first Star Trek movie. I
I did
just
too.
watched it again recently. I thought that was really good. I love Chris Pine. I think that guy is. I think he's a fantastic actor, um, and clearly carried the movie. I mean, the rest of the cast is solid, but I mean, Chris Pine was like just he made it his own and still like did a brilliant Shatner-esque
And the Kobayashi
thing.
Maru and all that, like they show
All
him.
the shit was really good, man. And I actually liked all of the movie. I like all three of the movies to different degrees. I had no problem with Into Darkness; it didn't bother me. And Star Trek Beyond was okay. None of those films offended me, but like a lot of Star Trek films, they're just like, well, they're just kind of disposable. And because Paramount doesn't put their best foot forward, with Paramount uses them as cash cowed so much of, especially the films, by giving them like almost no money and everything else, and they're just there's yeah, and it's kind of sad, and in that respect, because you want to go in like I don't have any animus towards Star Trek, right? Like I don't have any inherent hatred of it. I don't particularly care for it one way or the other. If they make a good movie, cool. If they make a good television show, cool. But if they don't, then they don't. Like, um, and I hate to say this, Joe, but I'm not a big fan of Stargate SG-1. I've tried watching it here and there, um, but I did watch the 2 seasons when they brought Ben Browder and Claudia Black in after Farscape got canceled because Farscape's a brilliant show. So I watched that for a couple of seasons. I thought, but I really liked Stargate Atlantis, even though it was kind of cheesy and it didn't have a lot of budget and everything else. But the cast was excellent. It was such a good cast. Like the whole the way they cast the show so well, and that it made up for the lack of production value or anything else. And I see that in a lot of what I would call Canadian sci-fi. This stuff that's all farmed out to Canada. It's all Canadian actors because that's the only way they can get this stuff made. There's a lot of really good shows in there. They're not like earth-shattering, but they're solid. And I've seen a lot of them over the years. And I have a soft spot for them all, and I know all the actors because I've seen them all in everybody else's show. Like half the cast of Battlestar Galactica, I've seen them 5 other things, and they're good actors. Like there's nothing. And so there's a lot of great stuff in there, and those people, they do good work, and but it all comes down to the writing, and then it comes down to the ensemble that they created. They create a great ensemble, which is what, and I will give this to the original Star Trek. It was a great ensemble cast, right? And that's what Abrams, and as a filmmaker, I trust J.J. Abrams to cast his films well, regardless of whatever he did right or wrong with the Star Wars films. He casts them impeccably. Daisy Ridley, John Boyega, Oscar Isaac, Adam Driver, like they're cast impeccably. Star Trek films cast impeccably. And but my biggest problem with J.J. Abrams is that, and this is all of his work that I've seen, is that he doesn't trust himself. He doesn't trust. He always errs on the side of going faster, so that the audience never has a chance to catch their breath, to figure out whether or not he's making a mistake or not. And that feels insecure as a storyteller to me. And at this point in his career, he should not be insecure about his films. I just don't think that. And I think he does that. I think he makes a big mistake in a couple of mistakes in The Force Awakens that way. And he definitely makes a couple of mistakes that way in The Rise of Skywalker, without a doubt. But then again, he might not have had any extra material or time to work with. He might have, like Lucas, these are the 2 hours and 10 minutes I have. I don't have any more than this. I don't have another 10 minutes sitting on the cutting room floor that I can cut back in. But I don't know. So, but I mean, I see that about his Mission Impossible movie. I feel the same way.
Oh, I forgot he did. Was that the third one he did?
Third one, yeah. And I liked that one. I thought that one was really good.
I only saw the first two.
Well, the John Woo movie is terrible.
Yeah, I remember that not being good.
Second one is not good. I've watched them all recently. I actually really like them all.
Well, don't they get better? Don't they get better as the more of them are?
Yeah. The minute Chris McQuarrie starts writing them, they get infinitely better. Chris McQuarrie, the guy who wrote the Usual Suspects, and
it's one of my favorite movies,
and Edge of Tomorrow, and all the good Mission Impossible movies, and I mean, he and Tom Cruise have worked together on on so many things together, and they have a rapport, and they're very, very good. And this is before McQuarrie became the director that he is today. But yeah, no, those are solid. I mean, I thought MI3 was very good, actually. Philip Seymour Hoffman as the bad guy was good. It was well done. I think that movie was pretty well paced. I don't think Abrams was unsure of the material in that movie. I would give him that. But definitely his two Star Wars films, he's got some problems. And I think even the Star Trek film, I think he keeps pushing the pace a little faster than it needs to be. But that's just my opinion. Now, who the fuck am I, right? So, I don't know. There you go.
So as we come into end of 24, man, and going into 25, how would you assess your year for your work and just everything? And what do you anticipate?
I am?
Yeah, just assessing the year.
I don't
reflecting on it.
I'm not writing enough right now, and I'm gonna change that going into the new year. I'm gonna just start writing little bits and bobs here and there. I'm not gonna worry about writing large. I don't have time for it anymore. I unfortunately get too many invites by people like you to come on their podcast and talk into a microphone, and I wouldn't change that for the life of me. But I think I've kind of reached a saturation level, and I can pull back from that a little bit and get some better balance in all of it. I'm happy where we are. Certainly, I think we're gonna try and hit 2025 and do some new things and change things and change the format up a little bit, and then hopefully it's successful and we can reach a wider audience. But ultimately, all that really matters is that you do the work, and you try to continue to be. Well, I know what I am, and I know what people expect of me, so I have to devote the energy to doing that, to stay ahead of the curve, to understand where we're going next, and continue to be that guy. That's hard. It takes a lot of energy, and that's part of the reason why over the course of time, certain aspects of what I do fall off, and other things go up, and and it's this delicate balance of trying to balance my time. I don't mind, like you asked me on Monday if or over the weekend if we could do do this show. I'm like, yeah, let's do this, but this is the kind of thing that I don't have any, um, I don't have any investiture in. So let's do it late at night or my night, your afternoon, my night, where I can just kind of like riff off into the microphone and do a thing, and it's fine. But I need to make sure that my best creative hours are devoted to Gold, Goods, and Guns, whatever that happens to be, whatever aspect of it we're trying to deal with. And right coming into the end of the year, I've got a lot of writing. I've got the newsletter to finish. I've got Newsmax's newsletter I have to do. I get all the shit done before the end of the year. And there's the holidays, and there's this. So it's trying to get all that done. So
what about into 2025? What do you, I mean, not even for gold, Golds and Guns, just our country or the world.
Oh God. I mean, I think, ask me on January 21st. We're 32 days away from the inauguration, 33 days away from the inauguration. There's a 67% chance that Trump will be inaugurated. Tomorrow, it'll be a 68% chance. On Friday, it'll be a 69% chance. And we'll keep going until we get to the inauguration day. A lot of shit that's happening. I don't know what they're going to try and pull off on us. I thought what happened today with the Federal Reserve and the hawkish rate cut was exactly what I expected. And then to watch the market melt down the way it did, I hate to admit this in public, but I was kind of cackling, especially because before I even looked at the rest of the markets, I just looked at the euro, and I saw the euro collapsing, and I literally spit my coffee. I had to clean my desk up. I was cackling and howling and spitting. It was hilarious. I'm like, and I literally walked around, and I shouldn't say this in public, but I literally walked around. I got up from my desk after I cleaned everything up, and I ran upstairs and I went, "Dear," to my wife, who's upstairs, like working on the upstairs to get it to finish, like do the floor and whatnot. She's working upstairs. I'm like, "Dear, I just am the best at what I fucking do." I was just like, "I'm great." I was like doing the dance of joy and all this shit. I'm like, "Really, dude, you shouldn't do that." But I do it in private. And every once in a while I'll do it in public, but I did a review today of everything we said that was going to happen in 2024. It kind of happened. So I'm in a zone right now. I don't know how long that'll last. And then we'll see where we are in 2025. What I think for 2025 is if Trump gets into power, everybody is cautiously wondering if he can actually pull off half of what he says he's going to pull off. I think it's going to be a lot more than that. And I don't think anybody is prepared for it because we've all lived under one regime, one kind of set of boundary conditions and rules for most of our lives. I think those boundaries are going to shift completely. And we're going to be in a world that we haven't experienced before, and it's going to fuck a lot of people up. I think it's already fucking a lot of people up. So we'll see if I'm right or if I'm wrong. But if I'm right, it's going to lead to a much, much, much different future than the one we have had as our base case scenario for years, including mine. And I'm as optimistic as I think probably anybody in our segment of the world is. There are very few people. I would say Alex Craner is probably the only one slightly more optimistic than me. And that's to Alex's credit, by the way. I remind myself to reserve the right to not get giddy yet because, life has a way of kicking you in the fucking teeth. And, so there it is. So in very broad strokes, as of right now, if the United States, let's put it this way. There's Trump out there talking about, hey, let's create a G2, us and China. Why don't we just get together and just set the rules for the world? Did anybody think that was coming? You know who's most pissed off about that? They even said it all day today. The Europeans. They know that they have no place at the table if the Chinese and the Americans carve up the world. And what have I been telling you for, a year and a half now? The negotiations between the United States and China to quote Obi-Wan Kenobi in The Phantom Menace, the negotiations are short.
Well, I think, you wish half this stuff wasn't happening in terms of the wars and the conflicts, but it provides opportunity for the stuff that we're doing. And, I think there's going to be a lot of conversations to be had. This isn't slowing down.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've even said, if people are willing to come on between Christmas and New Year's, it's fine with me, because God only knows what's going to happen. I mean, I'll put this episode up because this is what I wanted to, talk about movies and not spend a lot of time on political events, but because just to lighten it up in between Christmas and New Year's. But also, if something occurs, and there's a good chance it could, if people would want to come on, I'll be, I want to capitalize as much as I can.
And I think that, well, that's, it's funny. I set up a thing yesterday. Like, Sean Newman's working just as hard, right? And he was scheduled to have Alex on yesterday, and he pinged me on Monday night. He's like, "Dude, what are you doing tomorrow? Like, can you come on with me and Alex?" I'm like, "Sure." And then I forgot that I had actually scheduled myself with somebody else, and so I had to beg off at the last minute. But you can just see that there's right now the level of engagement in this circle is really, really high, and you hate to pass up an opportunity at this point to not. I don't want to get into that. I've learned over the years of doing this to not do the hot take as things are occurring, right? You give something 24, 48, 72 hours, let it percolate. The initial story, whatever we're told, is usually wrong. Let's wait another 24 hours. Let's see how they react to it. Let's see how they filter through the zeitgeist, yada, yada, yada. So, but, that doesn't mean that you can't be there at that 72-hour mark. And it doesn't mean, of course, that you can't, hop on a stream or a Twitter Spaces or a podcast like this one, even if it's 10 o'clock at night. I used to do that all the time. So part of what I've been doing recently, I'll be honest with you, is kind of regathering some energy and just taking some time and not working 8, 9, 10 hours a day every day, and take a day off here, take a day off there. Why? So that when we hit that moment where, because you can just feel it, like something's like it's going to be a big, it's like the election. It was a big deal. And I was so behind the curve at that point that I had to beg off and just not, react to the, for every podcast I went on, I turned down 2 others. That's how many invites I've gotten. Right. And I did a lot. So it's the same kind of thing, but you have to be available, and I got to be available to I got to be available to the ones that are doing the work. You've got to be there to be willing to hop in and do a thing. And if you've got an hour or two, then come in and do it, and just, go from there.
Where can people find you, Tom?
TFL1728 at Twitter, goldgoatsandguns.com, or Patreon/goldgoatsandguns. You guys know the drill. I've been there 1,000 times.
As always, thanks for coming on. Thanks for always being willing to come on. I love the you, Alex, and Steve Murray ones. That's a good little trio. We got to do one of those after the first of the year.
That'd be fun.
And
as a matter of fact, I think we're doing another episode of the Bald Ones on Friday with Tommy Kerrigan, with Counselor Kerrigan and myself, and then I think I'm supposed to do Mel K tomorrow at some point, but they haven't gotten back to me with a time yet, so we'll see. So that's my schedule for the week.
And then with writing. And do you shut everything down between Christmas and New Year's? Do you do podcasts, or are you done?
No, I've got to make sure that I get the writing out the door, right? I got to make sure that the patrons who are paying me to show up every day, I got to do those. Did my market report this morning. I'll do my market report on Sunday. I will not do a market report on Christmas. I will not do a market report on New Year's morning. That I won't do. But I will do what I need to do, and I'm not shutting anything down, because I think I'm going out on Saturday, but I'll be home. Like I don't leave the house. Like, people don't. I'm not allowed.
I don't think people understand. I mean, I don't, not to compare our schedules, but when you're in this world, because it'll be a year that I've been independent. You work all the time, and I don't even write. I'm not a writer, so I don't have newsletters. I don't have any of that. I just do podcasts. But you're constantly following things, reading things, listening to things.
You're working all the time.
All the time. This is not the 8 to 5 world.
I literally spend all day long. I've got the Slack server, our private discussion server, right? I got to check that all day long. I got to check my email feed. I got to check the comments on the Patreon posts. I've got to check all that. I've got people texting me all day long. I've got and then you have to keep up with the headlines as best you can. You got to keep up with your Twitter feed. You got to, so you're constantly even if you're not working all day long, you kind of are. Even if you take a couple of hours off, and I sit down and I play the bass, or be on the drum set, or do whatever I'm going to do, or hang out with the wife. Invariably, at some point, I'm going to pick up my phone. I'm going to scroll through my Twitter feed for 10 minutes, respond to something, or read a thing, or I'm going to do something along those lines. And then there's business development stuff. There's the podcast. There's the writing. There's this. There's that. Yeah, you work. You don't even realize that sometimes even on days where you say I'm taking the day off, you still work 4 hours. So.
Tom, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
You too, Mike.
I look forward to
the invite.
Thanks for doing this. I look forward to more conversations ahead, man, and we'll see what happens at the start of 25.
Yeah, let's optimism. I got so the last thing on the way out the door. So we had I had dinner with Cedric Youngelman of the Bitcoin Matrix a couple months ago, right before the election, and Cedric was as black-pilled as any person I'd interacted with for months. And I just took it upon myself to no, Cedric, therapy. It's okay. We're going to survive. Trump lived. It's not a psyop. It's not that. It's going to be okay. I had dinner with him, the same group of people, Larry Johnson, and Paul Tarantino, and a couple others, and a couple other podcasters and some people, and a big dinner down in Tampa. And I walked in, and Cedric walked up, and he was lit up, man. It was a completely different dude. And I was like, cool. I was so happy for him. And I'm like, dude, you look so much happier. Because at the end of the day, folks, I'm as negative and as mean and much of a curmudgeon as I could possibly be. But at the end of the day, you still got to put positive energy out into the universe, and hopefully some of it will get reflected back at you.
Tom, thanks for doing this, and look forward to more conversations ahead.
Absolutely. Merry Christmas, all.
You too. Mic drop.